A pleasant day to everyone. Again, this is Miss Zero, and our lesson is about the classical philosophies and the evolution of business ethics. And for today's lesson objective, first I'm going to describe what are the classical philosophies of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Second, we were going also to know the meaning of virtue ethics, and we could trace the history of business ethics. So since we are dealing with the history of the development of business ethics, syempre we will start with the classical philosophies of the Greek. Specifically, sina Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Even po yung mga ancient philosophical schools that has evolved from these great minds to what we are today. Unahin na po natin si Socrates. So, sino po ba siya? There were only a few recorded details on the life of Socrates. Siya po ay isang anak ng isang mason and sculptor and had practiced his father's craft for many years. Siya rin po ay pinanganak noong 469 before Christ. He received ordinary Greek education, but he devoted much time to read the works of the famous philosophers of his time like Zeno and Parmenides. Socrates was a very colorful figure in ancient Greece. Bakit? Kasi po sobrang sumikat siya during his time. He did not build any school or hindi rin siya nagkaroon ng tinatawag na philosophical system. However, he had very enduring influence over Plato. Si Plato po ay ang kanyang estudyante. Socrates did not write any books. His student, which is Plato, wrote about him in the book titled Apology. Despite Socrates' criticisms against the Greek god, he regarded the voices of this divine god which warned him whenever he was about to go astray or he was about to take the wrong path. The first one, nakilala siya sa pagkakaroon or nagkaroon siya ng trademark or what we call Socrates method. So ano po yung Socrates method? This is his technique, okay, na naging effective on doing teaching. Yan. So this kind of technique focus on giving the student question rather than the answer. So parang example, kung si student may tanong, ang sagot niya ay patanong din. Okay? It is a continuous proving into a subject with question. And based from Grigor Vlastor, a philosophy professor at Princeton University, he described the Socratic method as one of the greatest achievements of humanity. Bakit kaya? Is it because it encouraged a high degree of mental alertness, at the same time uphold the virtues of sincerity, humility, and courage. Another thing is that Socrates also believed that self-knowledge is sufficient to achieve a good life. Why? If knowledge can be learned, so we can also have a virtue. Therefore, virtue can be taught. An individual should seek knowledge because it is means to ethical action. True happiness is gained by doing what is right. He believed also that no one knowingly harm himself. Therefore, if harm comes to a person, then the person must have acted in ignorance. For Socrates, knowledge is the propagation of what is good, a virtue or excellence, whereas ignorance is the focus on what is bad, evil, and not useful. In conclusion, we are responsible for what we know and what we do not know. Based on this statement, each one of us is responsible for our own happiness. Next is we have Plato. So who is Plato? Plato born in 427 BC. Plato was raised with noble background. He obtained a good education in Athens and devoted much of his life to politics and writing poetry. Plato was considered one of Socrates' most brilliant pupils. He founded a philosophical school, the Academy, which stood from 387 BC until 86 BC. So aside from teaching in the academy, he also wrote dialogues. These are writing in the form of conversation. First, Plato wrote the Laches, which deal with courage, and Charmides, which means about common sense. His other works include Etipru, which was about pity. What is pity? Pity meaning the quality of being religious. And also, he have the so-called Lysis, which was about friendship, and the Protagoras, which taught of goodness. And he also wrote the Apology and Crito, which deal with historical event, particularly about Socrates. So, dyan lalong sumikat si Socrates. One of the famous work is the Republic, where Socrates is the main character. It deals with Socrates' discussion on justice and its meaning to individual and even in the city-states. There are three classes in the city-state. So ano-ano sila or sino-sino sila? First, we have the ruler. No? The ruler are the one who have the intellectual skills. Yeah? Sila yung nag-iisip kung ano yung mga dapat na rules and regulation. Para nga po magkaroon ng tinatawag na peace and order. Second po, we have the guardian. So, sino naman po yung mga guardian? The guardians are those who implement peace and order, while the workers are those who perform tasks to ensure that the city-states run smoothly. These three groups should work in harmony so that all members of the city-state will achieve happiness and fulfillment. Next, we also have Aristotle. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and a scientist who developed the scientific method. So, alam niyo yan. His interest in science was inspired by his father, who was a physician. He joined Plato Academy and remained there for 20 years. Aristotle also founded a philosophical school named the Lyceum, located near a shrine of Apollo Lysius. He also influenced by Plato and the Academy. Aristotle's earliest writings were also in a form of dialogue, such as rhetoric, okay, and also we have Idimus, or the soul, or on the soul, on philosophy, on prayer, and on education. His other writings include the Topic and the Analytics, which deal with logic and the study of reasoning, and dialectic, which is the method of argument. Now, what is virtue ethics? Virtue in terms which is equivalent to the Greek word ariete. So what is ariete? Ariete means excellent. So human excellence in ancient Greek philosophy did not include moral virtue. Therefore, an excellent human should include moral virtue in order to achieve happiness. The achievement of happiness is the end goal of human life. Now, what is virtue ethics? Virtue ethics is defined as a person-based ethics which looks at the moral character of the person carrying out a particular action. It is the necessary for virtue ethics to focus on helping people becoming good members of society. Virtue ethics does not focus on the following rules, but the development of good traits which will help the person make decision in life. Like for example, yung mga character traits, ano yung mga character traits natin? Let's say, generosity, prudence. Pag sinabing prudence, careful. Ayan. Careful in dealing with others. Kindness, and the like. So, when these character traits are developed, the person also learn how to break bad habits like anger, greed, and even being boastful. Next. Another thing is that one of the advocates of virtue ethic was Plato. In the Republic, he discussed key virtue, namely wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. On the other hand, Aristotle came up with the first description of virtue ethics in the book Necromantian Ethics. Aristotle believed that when people have good character traits, they can also control and manage their emotions. Aristotle and Plato are considered virtue ethicists. Plato was influenced by his teacher Socrates in conceptualizing virtues. Plato emphasized the necessity of virtue to achieve happiness. To know the good is to do the good. If one is wise, all the other virtue will follow. This is Plato's virtues of wisdom. This means that Plato believed that all virtues should be united to achieve happiness. In contrast, Aristotle was not contented with just knowing what is good. He believed that an individual needs to practice virtue to be really virtuous. Wisdom for him was just a way of acquiring the virtues. Aristotle was not in favor of unity of virtues. It does not follow what if one is the virtues, the individual will achieve happiness. Virtue ethics helps shape the individual's character. One criticism of virtue ethics is that decisions are also based on rational and critical thinking. However, virtue ethics is still a popular theory which has been the foundation for the development of the moral standards of society. And now let's talk about the history of business ethics. Ethics has its simple application in the Ten Commandments, which we can found in the Bible. Many ethical practices found in the Holy Scriptures include honesty, stewardship, and truthfulness. Aside from the moral teaching of the Catholic Church, other religions have their own interpretation of ethics which have guided people's behavior, including business transactions. Now, let's talk about the early years. In early years, business ethics has been recognized for thousands of years, dating back then the time of Aristotle. Aristotle discussed economic activities and emphasized the negative consequences of greed, which we describe as the unnatural use of one's capabilities in the pursuit of health for its own sake. He also had the first recorded definition of the term fair treatment for all parties in any transaction. So, ibig sabihin, dapat walang favoritism. Second, we have John Locke's key philosophy on the defense of property as a natural right also helped build the foundation of business ethics. And then, we also have Adam Smith explain that the common good is associated with 6 psychological motives and that each individual has to produce more common good with values such as prosperity, prudence, reason, sentiment, and promoting the happiness of mankind. And then the contributors to the emerge of Philippine ethics include John Stuart Mill on 1963, Immanuel Kant on 1899, and G.W.F. Jewell on 1920. They wrote about distributive justice. So pag sinabing distributive justice, fair allocation of resources among members and fairness. Distributive justice can be equated to Adam equity theory. Employees believe that whatever they contribute to the organization should be commensurate to what they will receive as outcomes. And also, one of the greatest contributors to the business ethics in the early year is we have John Rawls. He propagated the difference principle. The principle emphasizes equality in society. Through it allows an equality in the distribution of goods and services only if it will benefit the lowest class in a society. This principle holds that each person has a set of equal basic rights and all are given equal opportunity regardless of positions occupied. The greatest beneficiary of equality of opportunity are the less members of society. Next, we have the new generation ethics. In 1937, the first managerial textbook in business ethics was Business Ethics by Frank Chapman, Sharp, and Philip D. Fox. It distinguished between right and wrong transaction common in business organization. The book also pointed out that ethics and law are not the same. Some of the issues in the book include fair trade practices and dishonest selling and advertising. We also have Ethical Decision Model by Hand and Vital in 1986. So what it's all about? It discusses how the individual is prompted by the situation and eventually recognize its ethical content. Ethical decisions are based on the characteristics of the individual, such as religion, personal values, the strength and the moral character, and in addition, the culture of the organization can influence ethical decision. Next is we have Ethical Decision Model by Carell and Grisham on 1985, Trevino on 1986, and Johns in 1991. They contributed Ethical Decision Model, which emphasized that co-employees and peers are most influential in ethical decision. In the meantime, Farrell and Friedrich published another book on business ethics in 1990. It defines that the ethical standard to be followed in business organization. And 5 years later, Catherine Nelson and Linda K. Trevino wrote a book which addressed ethical decision making, the ethical problem encountered by managers, and how they can comply ethically and legally from a managerial point of view. We also have Brittany University, a center of business ethics. They are the pioneer on activities that supported business ethics and research. It later on assisted practitioners and professionals with business ethics programs and helped in founding the Ethics and Compliance Officers Association in the largest ethics organization in the US. Next is we have here the Journal of Business Ethics, started in 1982. While the Business Ethics Quarterly and Business Ethics, the European Review, were published in 1991 and 1992 respectively. Other journals in marketing, management, accounting, and finance publish articles related to business ethics. The Defense Industry Initiative on Business Ethics and Conduct of U.S. Government was established in 1986 and had a big impact on business ethics in the 80s. It acted as a guide in the practice of ethical conduct in organization. There were 18 defense contractors who drafted principles for guiding business ethics. Best practices were also discussed among members. In 1990, saw the development of business ethics as an academic principle or discipline, as well as a policy in organization. Business ethics grew rapidly towards in the 2020s. The massive scandal became widespread among the globe. In the US, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 was passed in 2002 to address the loss of confidence in financial reporting. The act tightening accounting control for all organization and transparency on all financial report was the key. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act 2002 on how we can protect our investors. Okay, so for us to protect our investors, we need to be transparent in terms of our financial reports. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening and be ready with our recitation.